I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the New to Wrestling podcast, After Dark. It's so funny, just said to Xavier, I was getting ready to do this episode, and I was literally thinking, like, damn, I do not want to talk about this. And not because I don't want to dive into the tea, I'm like really wrestling with myself about how badly I want to talk about this and how, like, it just makes me sad, so I don't. And
Right.
literally the first note in my notes on the Montreal Screwjob, which is what we're discussing tonight, is damn, I don't want to talk about this. And I forgot I wrote that. So feelings are the
It's so
same.
real. It's like one of those like glad you're gonna go do whatever, but sad to see you go, you know?
Yeah, hate to see you go. Love to watch you leave.
Right, exactly.
Yes, so tonight we are getting into part one of the Montreal Screwjob because there's a lot of material. I mean, we are going to be one of damn near hundreds, if not thousands, of videos out on the internet about the Montreal Screwjob. There are documentaries, there are like actual like videos, deep dives, commentary, interviews. Like there's so much material on this, and we are just one of many. So hi, welcome.
Hi, welcome.
If you're new here, so am I. My name is Kelsey. This is my gorgeous, stunning, incredible co-host, or the host, really. And I just come along for the ride. Xavier.
No,
He's
co-host
like
was correct.
Okay. He like leave it at that. He's the lantern bearer for us all. Been watching wrestling since he was wee.
Since he was wee.
Since he was wee. I'm obviously procrastinating. I'm so nervous to get into this, but tonight we're going to be talking about the Dark Side of the Ring episode, which is season 1, episode 2. They got right to it. The Montreal Screwjob, and then we also watched the Broken Skull sessions with Stone Cold Steve Austin interviewing Bret. I should have looked up when this actually came out because they're reposting from the vault. I don't know the actual date that this interview took place, though.
The Broken Skull session?
Yeah, hold on. Xavier's gonna look it up for us really quick because they're reposting them now because you used to only be able to watch them on like the WWE network.
Yes.
And now they're putting them on YouTube. So it came out like a month ago, but it wasn't filmed a month ago.
Yeah.
Five
March
years ago now.
2020. My apologies.
So it's probably filmed before whatever. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter anyway. I'm not the police. Like
Right,
whatever.
right.
So we watched that. So this episode is going to be covering mostly those two things. And then we're going
Correct.
to do a part 2 because in the Dark Side of the Ring episode, if you guys have seen it, they talk about, and a lot of the footage from this Dark Side of the Ring episode is from a documentary that was filmed during the Montreal Screwjob and the year leading up to it. And it's called Hitman Hart Wrestling with Shadows. And that is available on YouTube. I don't know how long it will be available. I think that someone posted it like 2 months ago, and I read the comments, and it is posted in its entirety. It's in excellent quality, and apparently it is the legit real thing. So if you guys are interested in watching it, because you used to only be able to watch it, I think, on Tubi, it's now on YouTube. So if you guys want to get into it, I'm sure most of you have seen it, but
And you do have a little bit of time,
yes.
because the Survivor Series episode just posted today, the day we're recording. That is going to be
February 6th.
Thank you. So that means this After Dark that you're listening to, is going to come out on the 13th. I mean, if you're listening to it, you know. We're going to do one episode of Monday Night Raw on the 20th. So then part 2 will be on the 27th of February.
Yeah, so you guys got time
So
to
you guys got
watch.
time to watch. And
And then Kiki with us about it after because
exactly.
it's an hour and a half, but let me tell you, it is riveting. I've already watched it. I started rewatching it a second time because there's so much there.
Hmm.
So we'll be talking about that. And then also one of our listeners, hey,
Hey.
commented on our Survivor Series video and recommended I think it's just called Screwed or Screwjob.
Hold on, I'm gonna find the comment just so I can give you a proper shout
Shout
out.
out.
Bernicia 295. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend a documentary called Screwed, The Complete Story of the Montreal Screwjob by Cultaholic. It's on YouTube. Give both sides of the story. So yeah. So they say that the dark side of the ring kind of is more WWE, has a more
Feud.
WWE bias. And then they also mentioned that the Broken Skull session that we're going to talk about is another good source.
Yes.
Um,
So in 2 weeks, at the end of February, we'll be talking about Wrestling with Shadows. We'll be talking about Screwed. And I feel like there was something else.
we'll figure it out.
Well,
When we get there. We'll see if
there's
there's any
so much
other
stuff. Yeah.
interviews or stuff we feel pertinent. But all right.
Yeah. Okay, great. So let's get into it. And like I said last time we did an After Dark, we're being a little bit more loose about these things now. So join us on this journey. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab a snack, grab your blankie, or if you're driving, just enjoy. But let's get into this Dark Side of the Ring episode. Um, so when it opens, it's pretty much a bunch of different wrestlers. We've got Stone Cold. Actually, I think it opens with Eric Bischoff, which jump scare.
Jump scare.
But they all kind of talk about how Bret took the business so seriously, and some people, and I relate to this, said almost like to a fault. Like he took it so seriously almost to a fault, and I know that I fall into that trap also, so I get that.
Hmm.
But how he was just so about the business, and obviously if you guys know Bret Hart, I mean he comes from like the Hart family, like they are the first family of wrestling basically, like one of many, but
Hmm.
I mean there it's intense. And that's why also I can't wait to talk about Wrestling with Shadows because they go into the dungeon, girl. But obviously Bret came up under his father, who is a very renowned wrestler, who really had a specialty in submission moves, which a lot of people talk about coming out of the dungeon is like all you do is get put in submissions for hours and
Right.
get your shit reorganized and like
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
spine. But it's really crazy. Eric Bischoff, So Drama, says, I remember exactly where I was when JFK died, and I remember exactly where I was when the screw job happened. Screwing over a Canadian hero in Canada, how much more evil can you get? And then he does a very evil laugh, which I was like, well,
You would
you
know.
spot it, you got it, Eric Bischoff. Evil recognize evil, my
Hmm.
beloved. Like, uh. Um, but Bret is obviously in the documentary and he opens with, the one thing you can say about me is that over the years, my story has never changed. He has always said the same story. I cannot wait to really get into this because I have so many. This confused me. This whole element of the many layers of the screw job of whose perspective it's from changes the whole tenor of it.
Hmm.
And it's just like it almost like made me more confused the more information I get.
Yes.
It's
And honestly, there's
so
still there's
much.
still like questions because there's lots of people that like take credit for it being their idea.
Yes,
So
which yeah, we'll
we'll
get
get into it.
into. And though I loved he said this, I would say he says I would say I was a real world champion because I actually went around the world and actually defended my belt. And I agree with this. Not that I've seen so much of Bret Hart wrestle, but I feel like we talk about this a lot where it's like you are a title holder and I haven't seen you wrestle in 3 weeks. Like you're really not
Mm,
going to defend the belt. I feel like we talk about this like every once in a while in the normal show where we're like, is anyone going to get out here and defend this belt or vie for the belt or go after the belt? Like what's
right.
happening? And he's like,
Yeah.
I did
And
go. I did fight.
so yeah, and I agree with that like to a certain extent, especially in that like Brett was probably the last of kind of that generation. He was at like the tail end of the golden era, which is like the, when Hogan reigned supreme and the Macho Man and all that stuff. So he was at the tail end of that. And was the beginning of what they call like the new generation. So that was like Bret Hart, Razor Ramon, Diesel, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker were part of the new like generation, younger, not as, world renowned. But we're coming from the era of like even like world champions in like early WWF days were like one, it was called WWF.
Ugh.
Yeah. And two, we're at the tail end of like the territories situations where the world
Right.
champion literally had to go from territory to territory and defend the belt.
Yes, that's
So
true.
Bret Hart's kind of hearkening to that kind of like champion in that like he was kind of the last of that era or and like wrestlers that kind of came from that like mindset.
Yeah, I do think that's such a good point. I do think that that time period is so interesting because like you're basically famous, like you're a world champion and you're traveling from territory to territory, and how crazy that like nobody, like people are probably have probably never seen you wrestle, and you like come into their territory like fans, and you come
Hmm.
into the territory and you like to see like this person. Like I just think that lore is interesting, that mysterious
Yes.
element that surrounds you to travel from territory to
Hmm.
territory defending
And
this title.
we'll talk about probably the best example, the best champion I can think of that was really kind of really embodied that is going to be Ric Flair. So if we ever get into like
Oh,
some more Ric Flair centric stuff, um, he talks about what it was like because he's a 16-time world champion. Most of those were during the era of territories. He was the NWA world
wow.
champion. And those world champions were decided by committee. So all of the
Right,
heads of
yes.
all of the territories would all vote so that they would decide who is going to be the guy for everybody. And then it was that champion's responsibility to go from territory to territory, defend the belt, and also make stars in each of the territories along the way.
Wow, that's
Uh,
fascinating.
so Ric Flair was kind of like the kind of embodiment of that, and somebody we can kind of look at and kind of get a better picture of kind of what that looked like.
Love that. Speaking of Ric Flair, great segue. So Bruce Pritchard's in this, obviously, and he
Hmm.
says that, we'd been hearing a lot about Bret Hart. Vince acquires Stampede Wrestling, which is where Bret was wrestling. It was his father's
Promotion.
territory.
Hmm.
Yeah. And he says, Ric Flair was dealing with health problems at the time, and he was kind of their champion, and Bret like seemed kind of like the golden boy, like a great person to, start making his way up and replacing him in like the top card. Um, he was disciplined. He was like a little bit old school. He had that charm. He could shoot. Like he just seemed like he had it all. Um, and it's great because he also says, and they don't really get into this, but he kind of just mentions it to set it up later, but how Bret and Shawn are like the perfect foils for each other. And I feel like you have said this
Hmm.
before, where you're like, they just perfectly foiled each other in like every single way. And so,
Yeah.
like,
And the
the
crazy thing about like this is like the 1997 like match is this main event was already a main event of Survivor Series in like 1992. Or
it's
I so
crazy.
we've all like they have been feuding a long time. Like a
Long
long time.
time.
Then it was Bret Hart was like newly like the world champion was kind of like getting his reps in, like building his kind of legacy. Shawn was kind of like the up and comer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So at that time specifically, I believe Shawn was the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and Bret was the World Champion. So it's like this has been a long time coming.
Long time coming. Yes. Also Jim Cornette, who's slowly becoming one of my favorite people, just the way that he is.
Oh, the
Like,
way he rants, I swear.
oh my Lord. But this, he says, if you crossed a genius with P.T. Barnum and Donald Trump, you would get the love child that is Vince McMahon.
That's so accurate,
That is
actually.
so accurate and freaky accurate. Like,
Right.
made my skin crawl. Not probably what he intended at the time,
No, but he
but
gets it.
ew.
You're not
Ew.
wrong.
So Bret becomes the champion in Saskatoon, and Bruce, and I will say I actually love that he said this, and it lends itself to my conflicted feelings about the Montreal Screwjob. But he says, I just want to mention that nobody wins the championship. Somebody tells you you are going to get the belt. Like, you're not actually
Mm-hmm.
fighting, brawling. You didn't actually beat him for the belt. We
Mm-hmm.
gave you the belt. Like,
Right.
he kind of like makes that distinction. And it's so funny because, again, it's one of those obvious things that, of course, like, but when you lay it out like that in the 1, 2, 3, you're
Yeah.
like, oh shit.
It's like wrestling is competitive, not in the like way that people think wrestling is competitive.
Yeah.
It is far more competitive backstage than anything that happens in the ring. In the
Yes.
ring, we know it's predetermined. It's a story. Their job is to tell the story. So I do appreciate that like he reiterates that point because it kind of like brings it all home, especially from the perspective of like the WWE. So
Yes.
like it's a little bit of like foreshadowing there.
Yes. And it's so, and I'm sure we'll get into the meat of it later, but it's so hard because it's like it's a company, but it's like a company that's like built with people, like performers, and that's
Right.
just so tricky because obviously it's like they're actually putting their bodies on the line, and but there's like company margins we have to stay in. We have to move past, we have to operate in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so tricky. I feel like you would thrive in this environment. I've said that many times. Like,
The chaos of it all,
yes, like I feel
probably.
like you could really like
Pivot.
do, yes. Um so then they talk about how, there's the Monday Night Wars, WCW versus WWE. Scott Hall is in this. They talk about the curtain call again. I'm not really sure, like 100% sure why. I guess because they're talking about like how kayfabe started to break, and then like the Montreal Screwjob is like really like, okay, for sure the wizard behind the curtain. I guess
Yes. And
that's
it
like,
also like it shows like we know how like Brett, Vince, Undertaker like reacted to those
mm,
things. So then when the screw job
oh,
happens, the fact that it's very much so the same participants also pulling the curtain back, it's just like oh hey, like remember this?
okay.
This is a precursor to this. It essentially is doing like that was like, oh, here's a little peek behind the curtain. This is how it works. Like rip,
Yes.
right.
Oh, okay, yes, because obviously we know that, and I'm jumping around here a lot, I'm sorry, but we know that it's funny because they say, like, well, we could screw over Brett because he's never gonna expose the business. He would never do that. And then immediately goes on television and exposes
Right.
the business.
Right.
I like, and it's funny because like that is okay. That makes so much more sense to me because the curtain call, he was livid. I remember he was like, "You destroyed wrestling." Him, Undertaker, all the girls were like, "You literally destroyed the sanctity of
Right. And
wrestling."
Jim Cornette, he
Livid,
also went off on it. Yeah. Livid.
livid. And Jim Cornette says something like, "You were invited into this like elite club and you squandered it," or something. And it's like, okay, like, and
Yeah. Well,
I love
that's
drama, but like,
yeah. Well, the fact that he still holds on to that feeling, like 30 plus years later is where I like am like okay it's time to it
release the,
I can understand at in the moment like you know what I mean like
of
someone
course.
betrayed your little boys club like I get it
I
sure
mean,
but it's been a long time sis like a long time like it's time to like
yeah.
ease up a little bit.
Time to unclench.
Right. Like, you don't need to hold on to
Unclench.
this. Like, Lord knows that's giving you kidney stones. Like, that can't
Oh,
be healthy.
period. And you know what? It's so true. Like we're saying, like wrestling is the business of pivoting. Girl, it's time to pivot.
It's time
It's
to
already over.
pivot.
It happened. It's time to move along. That's such a good
And like
point.
now we are so far past that point, like,
Oh, beyond.
and it was inevitably going to get to the point that it's at anyway. Social media was going, if none of this stuff had happened, it was going to happen with social media. There was no,
It's so true.
it's just a matter of like how sped up it was, you know?
Yes, and we're in the age of information. We were gonna find shit out. Like it's so true.
Right.
But yeah, Scott Hall literally says he goes, we didn't plan it, just happened organically, and I can't believe people still talk about it. It's really
Mhm.
crazy. But Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart begin their rivalry. And allegedly WCW earlier on, so WCW put out their feelers for Bret twice. The first time they offered him, I think it was a $3 million contract, which is insane. $3 million contract, but and Bret at the time was done with his contract with WWE, but he went back to Vince and was like, I don't want to go. Like, I'd actually rather stay here. The money's not important to me. He's a very loyal to the soil type of guy. Vince, who doesn't like to lose, like, is like, no, no, no. Like, we'll keep you. Sign. It's a 20-year contract for like $1.5 million,
It's crazy,
which
by
is,
the way.
that's
Just the length of it. First of all,
20 years?
yes.
He's already been wrestling for 14 or 15 years at that point.
Right. To me, this is a contract that was never going to
Never.
be withheld, like or
No.
held up. He, as far as I'm concerned, Vince had no intention of keeping this contract. There's
Never.
no way he could. And it just doesn't make sense. Like it just is not a contract that makes a lick of sense.
Unless they had some sort of thing in there that was like at year or some point you transition into a commentator. I have no idea. Either
And not for
way,
nothing, but basically all of 96 and most of like 97 and a bit of 98, like they're not doing well. Like they're doing better,
girl,
but they're getting their ass kicked in the ratings. Like as a company, they're not like flush.
bringing in the bacon. Yeah.
Right. They haven't gone public yet. Like this is like a whole thing. Like
Oh, yeah,
like they're
girl.
not they don't have that kind of like,
That
stockholder
cheddar.
money. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's like what are you had no business offering this contract.
No.
So let's
But I think it was
set that up.
I think it was a contest between him and Eric, and he was like, I am not one to be out. So I'm gonna just
No, 100%. And like and when you have someone who's like, I don't want to go, like,
And I mean, it's not like he was a bad wrestler.
no,
It's Bret Hart, girl.
Yeah.
Like best there is, best there was, best there ever will, or best, yes,
Yeah,
best there is,
you
best
were
there
right.
was, best there ever will be. So Bret was like, cool. But then Scott Hall says something too, which I think is interesting. Like if you don't want to be on top, you're in the wrong business. Like
Correct.
nobody gets into wrestling to be the mid card. Like you get into wrestling because you want to be the champion.
Right.
And so
it's funny because that's like a universal thing. Cody Rhodes
yeah.
says that in an interview like 20 plus years later. He was talking about like AEW wrestlers at the time, but he was like, these people would come up to me, he's just like, I don't care about the world title. And he was like, respectfully, what the fuck are you doing here then?
No,
Like,
literally,
like if you're
though.
not trying to like get to that spot, like if that's not your goal, why are you here? Like
I'm just happy to be a part of it.
like, okay, no, it's like the same. It's just like who like it's like saying like my goal is to be ensemble. You know? Like
Yeah.
that's
My
nobody's
goal is to be
goal.
Chorus Girl 3.
That's what I'm saying. It's nobody's goal. It happens that like that
There are no small parts, only small actors, and you can
Right.
quote me on that.
Amen. No, but it
Thanks,
gives
Lindsay.
very that, like
No, it's true. And honestly, I think it's even if you feel that way, maybe, which I don't know how, but even if you feel that way, like I think it's a weird thing to flex about because
Mhm.
it's like, okay, well, there are people here who actually want to be on top, as Hart Banks would say.
Right.
And like, so why are you here alongside me when I'm actually trying to do something with this?
Right.
I feel like keep that shit to yourself. Like, don't air that out.
Right.
But anyway, so obviously the beef between Bret and Shawn starts to go. Bret says, and Shawn Michaels was not in this interview or this documentary, so I don't know. But Bret allegedly asks Shawn if he can take a jab at the Playboy magazine thing. Like, he's like, hey, do you mind if I go after you for like being in Playboy? It's like a hot topic right now. And apparently Shawn's like, yeah, say whatever you want, go crazy, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, so I went out there, and I remember this. And he went out there and he's talking about it, blah, 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 ripping him to shreds. And he says, I go in the back and Shawn is crying. And he's like really hurt and upset. And I was like, girl,
Interesting.
what?
Right.
Interesting. And I was like, first of all, a cancer. Second, like, I was like, of course you're crying. But
Also, on drugs.
Uh,
I'm gonna just guess the emotional stability was not all there. Let's just call a spade a spade.
Period. And you could tell the boy is blah, 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 like
right
when you watch. And they never mention it in this documentary. They never mention it. Shawn was, tweaking. They never say any of that, obviously. But
we know.
We know. And who knows if he even remembered saying, yeah, go out there and say whatever you want.
Right.
Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Who knows? Weird, tumultuous times. But also, honestly, though, like, if you're setting up a rivalry and setting up a beef between two people, obviously somebody's going to take shots at you. Why are we hurting so badly about this?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Very weird.
Very, very Dramacita.
But again, it's also like there are two sides to a story. One side is not told. We just have to kind of take Bret's word for it. That's how it went down.
It's very, very true. So then, of course, there's the sunny days comment, which is wild. And this Bret is like, he goes, and if I were to guess, if anyone was sleeping with Sunny, it was Shawn. Girly, we know.
Yeah.
We all know.
Right.
He was like, so like, and if I were to guess, it's like,
I was like,
babe,
he was like grabbing her on national television and sticking his tongue down her throat.
He was like motorboating with cake frosting on his face and her titties. Like, did we forget? Like, I was like,
he's like, if anybody, and I was like, yeah, we know.
Girl.
Crazy.
Which, obviously there's it creates more tension. They end up in a brawl in a bathroom in Connecticut. Where that's the one where Shawn gets his hair ripped out, and it's so funny. Jim Cornette tells a story where he's like sitting in an office with like Vince McMahon and somebody else, and Shawn or the Brooklyn Brawler comes in first and is like, like Vince, like Shawn and Bret are beefing in the bathroom, and then Shawn comes in like 2 minutes later with a gigantic wad of his own hair. And throws it down on the desk and says, this is an unsafe working environment. And Jim Cornette's like, it looked like a possum. It looked like he threw down a whole possum right on the desk.
That's so gross. So gross.
He is so crazy for that. But so obviously, like Bret says, like, he said, sorry, I'm like being. Bret was like, the fight was like, he said like two prostitutes fighting on the street.
No, literally.
Like hair pulling.
And he was like, he could tell like he's not proud of that fight. Like Shawn's not proud of that fight. Like,
yes, he literally says we were pulling each other's hair and screeching like we were two prostitutes downtown. That is so the girlies fighting in the shower. Like
so funny.
Like, that is so funny.
100%. Oh,
and yes,
my
you're
God.
so right. You could tell he's a little ashamed of that one.
Right. It's so funny.
Wringing him out by the hair. But, so then Vince tells Bret he can't afford his contract anymore. And, like, I believe it. Like,
the thing of it all for me is maybe before breaking his contract, take the belt off of him.
Thank you Thank you so much.
Like, if you knew, like, you couldn't fulfill this, get it off of him first, and then deal with that. That was, you know what I mean? Like, all of this didn't need to happen if you had just used any amount of common sense, and instead of being like, I know I promised you 20 years and a bunch of money. Turns out, don't have it. Like, but will you do me the solid and, like, do this thing? Like, what? What? How? Like, and even, like, I mean, Bret really was a professional up until he got screwed.
Mm-hmm.
But like realistically, like anybody else, like you just broke their contract and now you're gonna start asking for favors? Like that's crazy.
Girl. No, and I'm saying and I think this is why I get so upset about it because I'm like, you can really like somebody commented like on the Broken Skull Sessions thing where it was and they were like, this is just proof that you can be like the best employee of all time and be professional, whatever, and then they'll still just fucking drop you.
Don't I
And it's
know
like,
it, girl?
girl,
Don't I
girl,
know
you
it? If that's not my lived experience, I don't know what to tell you.
holy swear to God. One day when
So
we
funny.
get into personal anecdotes, we'll have to tell that story because
Yeah, well, hey man, that was crazy. But yeah.
that was fucked. Anyway, so I I get it where it's and I'm all I it's so much, but thank you for saying that because it's like why you guys are supposed to be like the upper echelon, like pulling the strings, whatever. Like there was so much opportunity and time, like you said, to take the belt off of him. Like again, like Shawn joined Degeneration X, have there be a feud, he takes the belt, and then Bret like leaves and goes to WCW. Like there were
That's
things that
yeah.
could have been done
hmm
by the management who should be managing the
The
talent.
situation, correct.
And when because later when Bruce is like, it's just such a shame because like we're only here because like two men like couldn't look past like their differences. And I was like,
Is that what's happening?
really? Is that really again because you just said nobody gives anybody the belt, people decide. So
Right.
y'all should have made a decision a little bit whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Um but okay. Um so either way, he's like Bret or Vince like offers to negotiate even on Bret's behalf with WCW to get him out of the contract and into WCW, blah 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 blah. And allegedly he knew he was going to drop the belt at Survivor Series. And at first Survivor Series 2 Shawn at first he was okay with it. And Bruce says no one thought there would be an issue at first because Bret is such a man of tradition. He's such a
hmm
traditional wrestler. And then I guess he went to Shawn and said like, "Hey, this conversation has come up many times again. Again, Bret has never changed his story about this." He went up to Shawn and said, "Hey, I heard I'm going to be dropping the belt to at Survivor Series, and like I just want you to know that we've had our differences, but I will always be a professional in the ring. I will, you'll always be safe with me. You would never get injured on purpose, blah 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 blah." And Shawn is like shaking his hand and says, "That's really nice of you to say, but just know I would never do the same for you," and
Right.
walks away.
hmm
And I'm not gonna lie, I could believe that Shawn said this.
I also could
I'm
believe he
so
said this.
sorry.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and again, Shawn's on in this documentary, doesn't say, but I could see it.
hmm
And so Bret is immediately like, never mind, fuck that guy. I'm not like, and he says in the Broken Skull sessions, like, it was an honor thing for me because Stone Cold, I love him for this. He goes, like, be man to man. Like, did you just work yourself up over this? Was this just being over dramatic? Like,
Yeah.
which is a crazy question to ask, but he was like, did you just work yourself up over this and it was just bullshit? Or like, was this a real thing? And he goes, no, for me, it was like honor. It was like, you wouldn't put me over, so why would I put you over? Like,
Right.
I'm leaving. Like, what do you have to lose with me leaving? Like, just, respect me. And I don't know, like, respect in the business. Wrestling is so crazy to me. Like, the
Yeah.
respect and the
Well,
politics.
and the whole thing, like, and you like the whole thing only works if there's like a fundamental like trust that like because you're
Yes.
putting like you really are like giving your life up to like somebody else in these like scenarios
It's so
because there are
true.
like many a move that if done incorrectly or like whatever that you can really hurt somebody like really genuine
Paralyze.
yes or worse
Oof.
so because it's happened in the ring before it has been done so it's like if there is no like if basically for me it seemed like Bret was just saying like there was no baseline trust to be had. He tried to establish that and it wasn't there. So for Bret, it's like well, if I can't even trust him to not hurt me, why would I then reward that behavior? Is like basically why what he was trying to like get at. It's like,
And
why are
that's
we
fair.
rewarding this behavior if he's flat out telling me that if push comes to shove, I'll hurt you in the ring? Like legitimately. Like that's
Which is
not okay.
fucked.
Yeah.
I like, yeah, I think that's crazy. And I think that's such a good point too, because even Jim Cornette saying like Shawn is coming in and saying this is an unsafe work environment. You're literally like, but you're
Right.
not making it safe for anybody either. Like you're
Right.
not supporting anybody. Like
Hmm.
it's such a crazy thing. So, and Jim says, he goes, I agreed with Bret, but we had to get the belt. Like we couldn't have him go to WCW with the belt.
Yes. And they've already had the former women's champion go
Take the
to
belt.
WCW with the belt and throw it in the trash.
Yeah,
Like
girl.
we have priors. So you have to understand that from like the company standpoint, like, and when you're talking about like wrestling, like your world championship is the whole show. It is the
The
whole
main
reason
event.
anybody really cares. It's like how you distinguish who's the guy. It is the show. So
Mm-hmm.
taking the biggest prize of your company somewhere else, not just anywhere else, to your direct competitor is a no-go. Like they're never going to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And they couldn't risk it because his contract was ending that night. Like that night. This was his last obligation. So we'll get into it later, like when Bret explains what he wants to do,
Yes.
but there's no guarantee on the company side that that's what he's going to do. So here we are. Now this is where we are.
But also, like, I just, sorry, now again, I'm like jumping ahead, but I would just like, he's not proven he wouldn't get the job done. Like, do you
Yeah,
know what I mean? And I
correct.
guess,
But we've also it's not a like not trusting Brett, it's a not trusting Eric. Eric has also done things where he's told like Lex Luger's debut in
oh,
WCW, where he
yes.
basically told Lex Luger to go to like not tell WWE anything and just show up in WCW, because if you told WWE, then it's not going to be a surprise. It's not going to be like whatever. So there are priors where Eric has gotten into the ear of seemingly very like, upstanding employees. And Lex was up to this point. Like this was before all of the drugs. This was before all of that. So it's like even Lex even said he's like, I don't want to do that. Like I don't want to have to, you know what I mean? But he ended up
Mm-hmm.
doing it because that's his new boss. That's the guy
Mm-hmm.
that's paying his bills. So it's like we got priors.
I hate when we have priors. So sad. Anyway,
Hmm.
bleh. Um, Brett knows that the only person that can screw him over, who can actually call the match, is the ref.
Correct.
And the ref is Earl. Girl, to see Earl after all these years, this broke my heart, this whole thing.
Yeah,
What a
the
sweetheart.
real victim.
The real no, and that is not that is the T. Earl is the real, like, one of the biggest victims of the screw job, and we are not talking
I
about it enough.
no. Oh, so sad. He,
And
he makes me so sad.
it's so upsetting, and it's literally, he's like, I know it's been like 30 years, but it still makes me upset and emotional.
Well, because and then like for years, years and years and years after the fact,
You
like
screwed
he
Brett.
talks about, yeah, he was just like any arena I would go to, I would hear it, and it's like that was his friend. Like he knows he did. Like you know what I mean? Like that sucks.
He said he still gets it to that day, whenever
Yeah.
this was filmed. He's
Hmm.
like, I still get it. Any arena I go into, it starts. And I'm like,
Yeah.
people do better. Do better. All the information we have on this situation now, we're still coming for Earl. I will come for you.
Right.
Leave my dog alone. That makes me mad. That makes me really
Hmm.
upset. Like, I didn't like this. Poor
Right.
Earl. So Earl tells a story where they're on a plane, and I think it's from, I think it is like from Detroit to Montreal. Like they'd wrestled in Detroit and they were going to Montreal. And Earl is like, I was sitting in my coach seat and the stewardess comes up to me and says, "Oh, Mr. Hebner, like you have a seat in first class." And he's like, "My seat is definitely not first class." And he goes, "Oh no, like Mr. Hart bought you a first class ticket." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Girl, not the bribery." But I was
No,
like,
I also thought that a little bit. I was like, oh, okay.
"Oh," like, so he goes
Greasing
up and
them
sits with,
palms,
swear to God, he said, "Oh, why don't you come up here and sit next to me? Can we get
hmm
Mr. Hebner a drink? Please, come on, he's
No, fully,
thirsty.
fully,
Can we get
fully.
him a warm chocolate chip
Thirst.
cookie?"
Right. Shoulder rub.
Swear. Um, so he goes up, sits next to Brett in first class, and Brett is like, they're gonna ask you to screw me over tomorrow. And Earl is like, "I would never do that. And Earl and Brett's stories are very similar, like from both of their sides, where Earl got very emotional and was like, "I would never do that to you. Like, you're one of my friends. We got along very nicely. I swear on my kids, I would never let that happen." Blah, 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 blah. So Brett is like, as long as Earl is the referee, I'm safe because Earl gave me his word that he wouldn't do it to me. So, uh, like I said, they talk about filming the documentary. So they've been following Brett for a year up until this point to document what his last match would be. So this is, and again, we'll get into it,
The
but
part
like,
that's extra crazy is like you knew there was a camera crew, like you've been filming this man for a year, and you still were like, "This is what we're doing." Like,
crazy, which, yes, we will talk about more, but I so they're filming him. So it's crazy. He arrives in Montreal. He's covered by cameras the whole time. Like he gets mic'd, he gets wired. And we talked to this man, Harry Zafrani, who was the sound recordist on the documentary. And he said the director told us that we had to be very low profile. No one is to know that Bret Hart is wearing a mic, which I find very strange. It's like
very strange. That
were
was
they
very weird part of the doc, like this to me. I was like, why are we like,
why?
yeah, that's what I'm like,
And
what?
is it because since they were with him, because when we talk about the documentary, I mean, they knew all that was going on in terms of like the contract falling through, the whatever. So I don't know if they had, because Julie mentioned something sorry, and now I'm like jumping to the documentary,
No,
but like
you're good.
mentioned something where she doesn't think Vince is going to keep his word and she thinks Vince is going to screw him. And he's like, "Vince wouldn't do that to me." So I'm like, did they suspect maybe something was going to happen? And so they were like, "We want people to be honest. So like not have Brett wear the mic, like, or like Brett let people know he's wearing a mic." Like, I don't know. It was very interesting, but they were like, "Keep it super low profile. Like, don't tell anybody that he's wearing a mic." So he has this meeting. Brett goes into a private meeting with Vince and he's wired. So like there is audio. I was like, yes, the audio, the secret meeting audio. I was like, I was going
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And Brett basically says like, this week has been like really shitty for me. This isn't the way I wanted to go out, and he had built into his contract. And there's debate because, and sometimes he says he had creative control over the last 30 days, and then sometimes he says 60 days. I'm
Right.
not sure which one officially it is, but
Right.
either way, within the last X amount of days, he had creative control because he was like, "I just feel like WWE loves to screw people on their way out and cheapen their
He's
value,"
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which
I
who
mean,
knows?
sort of, sure.
Yes, no. I mean, again, like when you leave a company, you go out on your back. We know
Right.
this. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But he basically what they discuss in the meeting is that like it's gonna be what's the word? It's not a squash, but
He calls it like a smosh, a
a
snosh.
smosh,
Yeah.
smosh. I
Yeah,
think it is because they talk about this in the Broken Skull session.
like
A
a
smoz,
smodge.
smoz,
Smoz. Maybe that's it.
a smoz. It's like smize, but it's not.
Yeah.
And how like basically it's gonna be a run in. So like the like Bulldog and Owen are gonna run in at some point, and there's gonna be a DQ. So like Shawn wins the match, but he doesn't get the belt, and then Brett is gonna forfeit the belt on Monday Night Raw the next day in Ottawa,
Hmm.
allegedly. And that's what they agree on. They agree that it's gonna be a smoz. Crazy. And the only people that know that it's not are Vince, Shawn, Triple H, and I think Jim Cornette and Vince Russo.
Correct.
But I think Jim and Vince had the idea but didn't know he was actually going to do it. I think the
Correct.
only
That
people
was the way that it sounded from that. Both of, like, I love Jim Cornette's so funny.
This beef is crazy. I can't wait to talk
This
about
beef
this.
should be studied. So they both do agree though that like they left that meeting being like, oh, like it was said in like jest, not like a legitimate,
Yes.
not like a legitimate like do it. And so when like that actually all became the reality, they were like, oh, he did it.
Yeah, Jim was like, I was watching and I was like, oh, he's actually doing it. Oh my God. Wait.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
holy shit. That's crazy.
Right.
So they ask Bruce, they're like, Bruce, what did you know about that day? Like, what did you think was going to happen? And Bruce was like, I was told it was going to be a DQ, that Owen and Bulldog were going to run in. It was going to be a DQ. And he's sitting gorilla. Like
Mhm.
he's at the thing. He's like,
He's watching, yeah.
he's watching. And basically Earl is walking to the ring, is literally about to go out for the match, and he gets yoinked. He gets pulled aside by Jerry Briscoe and says, Vince wants you to call the match when Shawn puts Bret in the sharpshooter. And Earl's like, I'm not doing that. Like, what are you talking about? And he goes, does Bret sign your check?
Yeah.
No, Vince does. And if you want a job, you will do this.
Mhm.
Like threatens him.
Yeah.
And Earl's like, that was the longest walk of my life.
Mhm.
Oh, I just gotta chill. Oh, like he's like, I had no choice. Like I needed a job. Like, so
Right.
I
And
walked
I mean,
up.
like, and it is a good point as like, is Brett gonna keep you on his payroll? Like,
Like Brett's
no.
leaving. I'm so
Right.
sorry. Like,
Yeah.
and Brett
Sucks.
says to this day, he's like, I never blamed Earl. I never will. It was not his fault. They got him. Like he's just,
What
he
is
was
he going to
also,
do? Like, he has a
yeah.
family. Like,
And he says he told his brother, pack the car. He was like, pack the car,
mm-hmm.
keep it running.
Yeah.
Because shit's gonna hit the fan and
The
we
suit
have
Earl?
to swear. He was like, we are skirting out of here.
Right.
Oh my God. Crazy. So, longest walk of my life. This kills me. And I know we talked about this in our episode, but when Shawn puts him in the sharpshooter and he does it wrong, and Bret literally has to correct him.
Yeah.
And puts him in the sharpshooter. That kills me.
Right.
That
is like,
kills me.
oof.
Oh, that's like the twist of the knife. It's just so
really
sad.
and truly is like, I helped set up my own demise. Like, I literally instructed my own demise and I had no idea.
I literally have chills.
Like,
It's horrible.
crazy. Absolute insanity.
And I guess at the time he thought, and I would assume this too, that oh my God, what's his name?
Don?
Why am I blacking out? No,
Vince?
it's like not Vince. Vince is like right hand man. We did an After Dark on him. Hit Pat. Thank you. Oh my God.
Pat Patterson?
Yes. What a sin. I'm so sorry. Pat Patterson. He thought Pat Patterson was in on it, which I would also believe because he's Vince's like right hand man.
Right. I would also believe that.
And it was his idea when they were orchestrating the match to have Shawn put him in the sharpshooter and Bret reverse it. And Pat was like, I love when you guys do that. It looks so good. It's like really cool. So I feel like you guys should do that. So Bret was like, he thought Pat set him up, but he said in his Broken Skull sessions that now he knows that Pat did not know. And he didn't.
No, Pat was a very big fan of like the both of them. Pat was like a big advocate for both Shawn and Bret, like throughout their careers. And was like a huge, like, he talks so highly of their WrestleMania 12 like match, like for years and years and years after that. Like,
I mean,
thinks very highly of them.
Yeah. So like he said, he clears that up in the Broken Skull sessions where he's like, I now know that Pat did not know and was not involved in what happened.
Right.
And like I said, like like 2 people know, 3 people knew, really.
Right.
But so the screw job happens. Bret says when he was put in the sharpshooter, he was able to see Vince, and Vince is screaming, standing and screaming, ring the fucking bell. Ring
Right.
the fucking bell. And Earl is like, I didn't really know what to do. Like, even as it was happening, I was like, I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to do. And he goes, but Vince was good. That bell was ringing whether I called the match or not. It didn't even matter what I did.
Yeah.
Like, so I just called the match. Like, I just did it. But what Bret says when he sees Vince, he makes the split-second decision to grab Shawn's ankle and like lift himself up so that he like it
It
shows
looks
he
like
wasn't tapping.
right.
He was like, I put myself in a position to make
He
it.
reached back for Shawn's like leg, being like, I'm still trying to like compete, and like make it obvious that that was the case because he had a feeling. So
And he literally 2 seconds after the bell rings gets the reversal on Shawn anyway. And so he's
mhm.
like, obviously I didn't tap out because I just got out of the
The move,
submission.
yeah,
So what do you So Vince, as we talked about in the episode, gets up and immediately stands in front of Bret because he wanted him to know that it was his decision.
right.
Shawn and Earl run for their lives.
As they, yes,
Like Earl is like, he left immediately. I didn't even see the aftermath. I immediately left the building, which was smart.
right.
Shawn leaves and Jerry Briscoe is out there like screaming in his face, like, get out of here, get out of here. Like,
Yeah.
whoo, crazy.
And you can see
Um,
like even like on the pay-per-view, like that he's like nervous running out of the building. Like he's
yeah,
like he does like literally he raises the belt like once right before he like ducks behind. He's like, huh, and then leaves. Like
yeah.
crazy.
And people were throwing shit. People
Oh,
were pissed, girl. Um, So Bret obviously freaks out. He spits the loogie. He starts trashing, the monitors, the tables, the
mm-hmm.
whatever. He does that iconic WCW in the air to let people know that's where he's going. Um, and then we get into they take it back to the meeting between Jim Cornette, Vince Russo, and Vince McMahon. So this is funny because the bottom line is that both Vince Russo and Jim Cornette take kind of begrudging credit for the idea for the Montreal Screwjob.
Mm-hmm.
And allegedly what happened is they're all at like Vince's house or something, the 3 of them. Jim Cornette and Vince Russo can't stand each other. I have this quote. Jim Cornette says, if one of us was an African American lesbian nun and the other was a Nazi skinhead Martian from outer space, we still could not be more different.
Right.
That is, first of all,
So funny.
hilarious.
Right.
Like, who even puts those words together in a
I was like,
sentence?
that sounds like a rant that I would make. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
No, it's so true. I'm telling you, Jim, one of the girls.
One of the
Jim could
girls.
Jim could sit right alongside the 2 of us and boop, boop, boop,
Gab,
boop,
gab, gab, gab,
gab, gab,
gab.
gab. Girl, we would
Probably
be
run circles around us, honestly.
no, and it would be a clinic. I would learn so much. And we would be sitting poolside with his Pomeranian
Mm. Amen.
having the talk of our lives. Anyway, so I guess like Vince is talking on the phone to Bret, and then like Vince is calling Shawn and going back and forth. He's like the middleman between, and like Vince Russo says that Vince McMahon offered him and like endless ways for him to drop the belt to Shawn, and he wouldn't take any of them. He soured all of them. Like he just wouldn't do any of them. So he was putting them, he alleges that Bret put them in the difficult position. And Jim says, I was the one that just came out and said, just double cross him then. It's as old, he says it's as old as the hills itself, drama.
Right. And then he
Um,
goes and tells some story from like 1930. Like, you're like, huh?
yeah, the Strangler Lewis versus Henry DeGlane or Henri DeGlane or
Hmm.
whatever it is. And how like he basically takes him out with his own move. There's biting involved. If you guys want to look it up, go crazy.
Hmm.
But it literally happened in Montreal where
Hmm.
somebody was screwed out of their belt with their own move. Crazy. So he says history should just repeat itself. And I wrote, Jamantha Marie, I can't believe you.
Mm-hmm. Samantha
Um,
Marie.
and he says, like, I just believed Bret would never expose the business, double cross him, screw him out of it, take the belt. He goes to WCW, and they're both hot. Like, Shawn is hot for winning the belt. Bret's hot because it's, he lost the belt. And, like, everyone wins. Now, Vince Russo denies that Jim Cornette gave the idea. He says, I came up with the idea, blah, 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 blah. Jim Cornette says Vince Russo is the biggest liar in professional wrestling, and imagine the scope of that, how much there is.
Yes.
Which
Yes,
is
yes.
so, because not even just like the breadth of the size of the wrestling business, but how many liars are in it.
No,
So it's like
it's a long list.
It's one of those like these maps grids,
Mhm.
and it's like he's way up here, like
Right.
the peak.
Right.
But like both of them say they truly could not believe they actually did it. Like Vince Russo says it was a terrible night. I wish I hadn't even said it. It was the worst thing I could have done. Blah 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 blah. We never get to the bottom of who actually said it, and it is the one time I wish Vince McMahon was there to be like. But honestly, knowing Vince, he'd be like, I thought of it.
Right.
So we'll never know.
Yeah, and there's also like Triple H takes credit for it. Like everybody takes credit for it. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. So
It's a weird
whatever.
thing.
Which I would never take credit for that girl.
Right.
So Jim says when he saw it was happening, he also ran for his life from the building, and he says, I saw another pair of headlights in the parking lot screeching out of there, and I knew I had just beat Earl Hebner out of them.
Right.
He's like, I just made it before, like right after him.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He goes, literally saw Earl fleeing the scene. But Bruce Pritchard said he was really pissed and he felt very betrayed for not knowing. And he says he and Vince like have it out like the following week. And Vince is like, I didn't tell you because then you would have known. And
You
then
would have been an accomplice.
You would
Yeah.
have been complicit. You would have been complicit. And I understand. Like I understand like being initially annoyed that you weren't in on it and then being like, thank God I was not in on that. Ooh, my
Right.
God. I did
And
not
yeah,
want to be.
like he was. I think Vince tried to, for all intents and purposes, like put the onus on himself.
Which
is it's your company. By all,
you should.
It's your company. It's your decision at the end of the day. But like, I think he tried to make it like, no, blame me. This is my call. Like, direct that shit here.
Yes.
And for better or worse, it was.
Yeah. And I think that at that time, Vince, and even until forever, Vince is so, it's just, there is no denying that he controls everything. So he
Right.
would have never been able to say he didn't know this was going to happen. Like,
Right.
I think Jim says it like the lunch menu still to this day doesn't get approval without Vince seeing it.
Yeah.
Obviously he was still running the company at the time this was filmed, but
Right.
like, so he had to take, obviously everyone was going to know he made the final call. So I will say, like, at least he was the only one to fall on his sword at that time. Like, and he
Right.
had to take that L, girl. But obviously I really did want to get into this because when Bret comes to the back, obviously all these wrestlers are freaking out. Like they're pissed, and Undertaker's like, I'm going to get Vince to see what this is about because this is literally insane. Like this should not have happened. And I had that moment of realization where I was like, as a wrestler, this would scare the shit out of me. Like Bret Hart was like in a contract, 20 years, $1.5 million, whatever, even though it was obviously too good to be true. But like he's in a contract, he's a good wrestler, he's a loyal wrestler, he's never not said no to anything. He's like
basically been at the
his
top of the
dues.
card since 92, 93. Like,
And they're even screwing over the top guy. They're screwing over the top guy. That would freak me out. Like I'd be like, nobody is fucking safe then. Like nobody's safe. Like I had that moment of like, imagine being like a mid-card wrestler. I'd be like, oh, they really don't care about me then.
Yeah.
If they're not even giving him the courtesy, they're not going to give me shit. That's like a scary, I would understand like the panic of that. Like,
Yeah.
what did I
Well,
just watch?
and I also think like the Undertaker specifically is like his kind of like de facto role backstage is like the leader. He keeps
Mm-hmm.
the peace. He like, he very much like is that guy. So I think and he's like one of the few people that can like bust down Vince's door and be like, "Yo, what's
Gather
going on?"
them.
Right. What's going on?
Period. Because you're not saying no to him.
Right.
You're gonna explain yourself real quick. So I guess there's a conversation between Bruce and Vince when Undertaker comes to get him, and Bruce is like, and again, Vince McMahon is not in this documentary, so this is all hearsay from Bruce, but he says like, "Oh, I'm just if you have to go talk to Bret, you have to talk to him right now,
Hmm.
and you have to explain, and he's probably gonna hit you, and you need to take it."
Yeah. He's like,
Which
you owe
is
him that.
period, and he definitely does. I just can't imagine Bruce saying that. I don't know why I'm like accusing him of lying, but I was like, I can't imagine Bruce being like, and he's gonna hit you, and you have to take it.
Yeah.
I
For me,
don't know
that sounds
why.
like something the Undertaker would say. Like, you know what I
Period.
mean?
I'm like, I feel like exactly. I was like, Bruce, and maybe I don't know. All hearsay. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But I was like,
Hmm.
I just can't envision him saying that. Whatever. Like I know him, but either way.
Hmm.
Vince goes to the locker room. I loved this because Brett was like, I was literally naked. Like I was like getting in the shower, and I was like, if you are still here when I come out of this shower, I am going to hit you. Like we're getting it popping and I'm not playing about that. But I
Right.
am going to be in the shower. And they said he took like an exorbitantly long shower too. Like he was
Oh,
in there.
yeah.
And I would too. I would
Yeah.
too. I'd be like, wash my sins away. Oh, and before that, I'm sorry. Before that, Brett's like, it was weird. I go back to my locker room and Shawn is in my locker room, which he never changes with me. He never comes in the locker room with me. He never gets in my space. And he's in there and he's swearing up and down to God, swear on my kids, swear on my
Mhm.
life, blah, blah, blah. I had nothing to do with this. I'm innocent in this, blah, 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 which we know is not true.
Right.
So and he's like crying, of course,
Right.
and whatever. So either way, Brett goes, takes a shower, and when he comes out, Vince is still there. And this is really funny because he goes, I think he says this in the Broken Skull
He
sessions.
does, yes.
He's like, at first I thought I was just gonna pop, like, rush him. And he goes, dripping wet naked. And I was like, okay.
And
He
then
goes,
he was
but then
like, he thought better of it. He was like,
he goes, I thought better of it because I was like, that's not the look for the movie, if they eventually, which again, like there's 10,000 pieces of material about the Montreal Screwjob, and at least
hmm
not as like he punched Vince dripping wet naked, which honestly I
Right.
think adds to the ambiance, but
Yeah.
that's just me.
Hey, same.
We all have our vices.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But either way he goes, so I very slowly got dressed, and as I'm lacing up my last shoe, I was like, wow, this is really happening. And apparently Sergeant Slaughter was there like backing Vince up like to defend him or something, and I was like, okay, you just went down like 10 points in my book, but whatever. So he knew, I guess, because he and Vince had gotten into almost like a skirmish before, and like he went to hit him and Vince kind of had him in a defensive move,
They
and
like
like
lock up.
they lock
Like,
up. Yes, thank you. And so he's like, I knew it was going to get to that. So I knew I had to come up. I love his brain. I love his brain. Mwah, I love his brain.
he's like, I knew if I swung like over, like someone was gonna grab me. He's like,
Yes.
someone was gonna grab me and stop me from hitting this man, and I needed to hit this man. So,
Ooh, I love that. I love
he goes,
that.
I knew someone was gonna come rush me soon, so I had to do it now. So instead of going over, I just went with an under, like an uppercut.
Oh, God,
So
that's
crazy.
gorgeous. Yeah, because he's like, because he says in the Broken Skull sessions, I dropped my wrist to like my foot. And I
Hmm.
just thought, like he powered up like he was in like Naruto or like
Right.
Yu-Gi-Oh or something, and he was like powering up, and he was like 14 years and just
N-
bah.
Crazy.
And he says he punched him so hard, it was such a beautiful uppercut, he literally flew off the ground. Vince went flying like a projectile. Love
Mm.
to see it. I would pay money to see that, and unfortunately there is no footage of it because Brett, or no, somebody, maybe Jerry Briscoe, somebody stops the film crew from going in the locker room.
Well, I mean, they shouldn't be in the locker room.
Well, also true.
Like,
Either way, and it's funny because there are all these people just like standing outside the locker room and you just hear a kerfuffle, like a whatever, and then like Vince comes out like a few minutes later,
right.
like limping girl, bustisha. He was busted up.
And yo,
So
for
funny.
real.
But he was knocked out cold. Sean's crying. And Bret walks up to Shawn after punching Vince's lights out. And he said, Shawn was like cowering, like I was going to literally rip his throat out. And I just said, hey, Shawn, thanks for the match. And shakes his hand.
Mm.
And you want to know something? Bret is a man who can read the room in this aspect because Vince will learn from getting humiliated by getting punched in the face, but Shawn will learn more like a I'm disappointed in you. Hitting
Yeah.
Shawn won't do anything. Like it only made him scrappier. Like their fisticuff in the bathroom only made him
just
like
made him more of an asshole. Yeah.
yes. So to be the bigger some people to live with this the kindness after you just screwed me out of the belt on my very last night here after being here for 14 years or however long he'd been
14
there.
years.
14 years. Thanks for the match. I know Shawn. I know that. Like wrung him out like a towel, bitch. I know
Right.
that cut him up because it would cut me up.
Right.
And and let me say I would never do this, but that was the right call. And I think Stone Cold says that like that's the right call in terms of Shawn. Like what you needed to do was the correct call in that situation.
Right.
And I agree.
Right. Because it was one of those it's like it was the perfect thing to say because it's like one, Shawn is like, up and down denying that he had anything to do with it, per the instructions of Vince McMahon.
Right.
So like that is just a subtle like way of just being like, I know, and thank you. Like,
And thanks.
right. And that's like, ooh, like that's gotta suck.
Oh, mama.
You know what I mean? To like,
yes,
that's gotta suck. To just be
Suck.
like,
Ooh.
you did this thing, and then the guy walks up to your face and thanks you.
Homicide, fatality. It's
So
over.
literally, that's rough.
That is a rough one. And again, the correct call to make because I know that just oof. So Earl gets exonerated the next day. Vince like calls a meeting and is like, just so you know, Earl had nothing to do with this. He was like, it's not his fault. This falls on me. Ba 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 ba. Which, like we said, unfortunately, doesn't absolve him from the hate he gets from the fans.
There's still the court of public opinion. Like it's still a thing. Like
the court of public opinion, girl. Like the jury is always in session. Let
and
me tell you.
And in wrestling, it is real loud. So
so loud. They all have a gavel and they all have a microphone.
Correct.
And it just breaks my heart. It just makes me so upset for Earl and like the fact because even he said like certain wrestlers who didn't want him to referee their matches.
Right.
And that's just upsetting to me and yeah. It's
right.
I just hate it.
It just had such a negative effect on him and it like he was blackmailed like into doing it. Like it was do this or you won't be able to feature like this is Earl's job. Like you think Earl was doing anything else like other than being a wrestler or being a ref for however many years? Like no. Like this is what he loves to do. Like and they were like actually you're going to do this. So
and I don't know if horrible. And I don't know if I said this but he said people think being a ref is like you just go out there, count 1, 2, 3, it's over. He goes, but you are literally guarding the safety. You are a coach. You are like whatever. And he says you are thinking for 3 people.
Correct.
It's hard work.
You have to know what you have to know what what is going to happen in the match. You have to know how like you're keeping time essentially. You're relaying information from people in the back to the wrestlers. You're still performing because you're in front of a live audience. Like it's not an easy job. And like I don't know. I feel for Earl. I really do.
Oh my God, I really could cry. I've been thinking about him. It makes me so sad. I love Earl so much. Check the track. I've always loved Earl.
No,
I hate that this
really.
happened to him. It makes me
Yeah.
so upset. This
Hmm.
whole thing. But Earl, I'll always love you, girl. You always got me. I'll always back you up.
Facts. Big
And if I
facts.
ever hear that chant,
It's going down.
it's going down basement. Friday the
Mhm.
13th, guess who's playing Jason?
Crazy.
So I whatever. So I have to move on. So Bret obviously says, I hate y'all, and goes and immediately exposes the business, chirp, chirp,
Hmm.
chirps, starts talking of all kinds of shit. And Vince tries to exonerate him. I can't wait to watch this. Vince tries to exonerate himself on Monday Night Raw because the girlies are chirping and everyone's upset. And it apparently comes off really awful. Like he comes off like cold and scary and like dead fish eye and just like
Hmm.
nasty.
This
Um,
interview is the birth of Mr. McMahon. That is where the character is born.
I can't wait to see this because I've seen clips of it and it disgusts me.
Right.
It disgusts me. Only Brett has to look in the mirror and know that he's the reason like he got screwed out of this or whatever. And
Right.
it's like he like soiled tradition. He ba 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 ba. It's
Yeah.
like after you in the meeting said, I'm open to anything you want to do. And so Brett should like I would be like, listen, like if you really want to be that this is what I hate. If you really want to be about it, please be about it. Literally saying to him in that meeting, if you don't drop the belt, we'll take it from you then. Because you're like, I am the boss, I run this company, I need the belt. And if you want to play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Instead of being like, no, we'll do anything you want. We can, it's a DQ, who cares? It's
Mm-hmm.
fine. Then you
One, I
can
don't
drop
think
the
Vince McMahon
belt.
has ever spoken like that ever.
No,
But
never.
yes,
But I'm just
the
saying,
gist I
like,
get. Yeah.
like, I just don't understand it. Like,
Right.
if you really want to be like the boss, I make the decisions, then say that. I'm going to take it off you one way or another. We could do this the easy way, or we could do it the hard way.
Right.
And then coming on TV and being like, he screwed himself, Brett screwed Brett.
Right.
Give me a fucking break. Like, I just don't like it. I don't
Hmm.
like it. If you're gonna be about it, be about it. I just I'm not
Well,
with that.
yeah, yeah, but this is how the character is born. This is how
I
like
know.
this is him leaning into being like a shitty person. Like that's the thing. He's like this giant like narcissistic megalomaniac who like fully is just eats his own shit. He believes it. You know what I mean? So here we go.
Crazy. It's
Here we
crazy.
are.
So, oh, I can't believe it. I can't wait to see this. So, Brett goes to WCW, and at first they bring him in as a referee. I don't know what that is. And I kind of like tried to think about it objectively, and I was like, I could kind of see how that might
No,
be
it's a
interesting.
waste.
No.
It is
Oh,
it's a
okay.
waste. It's like it is he had so much like popularity coming out of WWE and they didn't capitalize on any of it. They didn't like you have one of the best in-ring performers to ever do it. Ever do it. And you're just going to be like you're a special guest referee. It's like you didn't even introduce him to your audience. Like, it just makes me crazy. And I love the line where he's like, Eric Bischoff is an imbecile trying to run a wrestling company.
Period. I wrote that too. Okay, because hear me out. Obviously, this is the way they handle this is so stupid.
Mhm.
But the idea of him like coming in as a referee as like almost like a joke because he just got screwed by a referee,
Okay, I can
kind
see
of
that.
funny. Like not funny, but like I
Ironic.
wish ironic, and I wish that they'd taken that and then he was like really actually heel Bret Hart. And I'm not saying he stays a referee, but like brought us in as a special guest referee and then kind of being like, you know what? I actually like it here. I'm gonna stay here and wrestle here, and he's a dick. Like because he's been screwed by the business, so now he's gonna screw the business. They flopped with this so hard. The
flopped with him
story
so
was
hard.
right there. I hate this. And
It's
obviously I haven't seen it
they
all,
don't
but
they didn't know what to do with him. They had no plan for him. They just wanted him because it was another big name from WWE that they could take and be like, "Oh, look, he doesn't want to be there anymore. He wants to be here." They didn't do anything with him. They had no plans for him. They like wasted he even says like they would fly me out and like I would find out
first class, 5-star hotel.
and I would
I'm
find
not
out that
even on
like
the card.
I'm not even on the show. So like I mean I guess if like that's really what you want to do, but it's like you're wasting my time. Like
And then you start to see how the money is being mismanaged.
oh
Because like
there? It's crazy.
you are paying for me to fly out first class, me to stay in the penthouse 5-star hotel. I come and you're paying me to show up and I'm not even on the card.
And that's one superstar, one
One
wrestler
and
times however many people they were doing that
60.
because not for nothing, it was the Hogan, like it was Hogan, it was Nash, it was Hall, Goldberg when he shows up is the only superstar that wasn't already on the top that broke through to the top. Sting, obviously, well, he was a tried and true WCW, so love to see it. But Macho Man, those were your top. No one was ever getting into that ever. No one was going to break into that because Eric Bischoff just relied on that formula for so long that we're just like, okay, but no, but you didn't make any stars, you didn't develop anybody that was worth their salt as far as like wanted like that was a younger wrestler that wanted to prove themselves left. Like
Girl,
left. Like
messy.
you didn't know what you were doing. Just say that.
Uh
Like just say that.
just we need a little bit of growth. We need to accept. It's so crazy how you could fumble that bag. The storyline is so easy and you could go from there. Like he could be a heel for so long and then you could be like and now he's like starting to love the wrestling business again and he comes back around and like there's so much whatever. It just he makes me so enraged. And he's wearing that stupid shirt that said like 82 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I
Oh, well,
wish you
that's the
would
name
get a
of his
grip.
podcast.
I know. I
It's
know.
stupid.
But having your and one day we will have new to wrestling podcast merch and I will stand on that. But the 82 weeks with Eric Bischoff on your own fucking chest, like I don't know about that. Your
Yeah.
own name, I don't know. It just makes me mad.
Not the yeah,
Not the
stupid.
serve you think it is. Not
And
the
it's
serve you think
and
it
still
is.
it's just like you
It's
are like
it's
I'm
old
sorry.
tea.
No, it's just like I will make this point till the end of time, but like in no other like business, sports, do you just sit on an accomplishment you made 30 years ago with no follow-ups? Zero. Like what? You went back to WCW and then it failed, and then you were brought into WWE as like the general manager, which is great. Like you really can't fuck that up because you had Vince above you calling the shots realistically. So like what? What? What are we supposed to be like? Oh my God, you're so great. That one time between the years of 1996 and 1998, you were successful. Like we're all supposed to be like, no, fuck you. Like, fuck you. Like, I'm not gonna kiss your ass because you managed to beat WWE for a year and a half. Congratulations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no one can take that away from you. Sure. Great. It was 30 years ago. Who talks about TV ratings from 30 years ago in any other aspect of anything?
Sure.
Nobody. No one's talking about the
Nobody.
ratings of the Super Bowl 30 years ago. No one's talking about the ratings of any show from that time. No one cares anymore. No one cares. Shh.
And if
Shh.
they are, they're weird. Like if they
Weird.
weird
Weird.
girl. I'm sorry. I
Ugh.
just yeah, he irritates me to no end and I can't wait to dive back into the Monday Night Wars when we
Oh,
get
we will
farther
definitely be getting that.
in
Yeah.
because I can't wait.
He makes
Sorry,
me
also
rage. Sorry.
No, I
Sorry,
love.
everybody that has to listen to my weekly Eric Bischoff rant, but I cannot stand that guy.
This is partially my fault because when I brought it up, and two, I texted Xavier earlier today and was like, "I love when you get mad." Because what was the clip about?
Oh, about the fate or the Survivor Series match between the Disciples of the Apocalypse and
And the Truth Commission.
Commission. Yes,
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 and
yes.
you ran, it was so funny. So partially my fault because I do love when you get mad and I never tire of listening to you rant.
Thank you, thank you.
Um, Anywho, Eric Bischoff fumbles the bag. Bret Hart calls him an imbecile, duh. And I said, OMG, did Eric Bischoff just kind of sort of admit that he fucked up? Shocking. Because he
Hmm.
says, like, we really didn't have a plan for Bret and we kind of flopped. And I was
Yeah,
like, did
yeah.
that just happen?
Hmm.
Crazy. And when the flop is so bad that the narcissist admits it, whoop,
Crazy.
be boop. Um, and okay, this is what I want to get into. There are people who think the Montreal Screwjob is a work.
Like
Like
the whole thing.
everyone was in on it.
Yeah, and also like, well, the fact that like Scott Hall said it, and then Cornette follows it up with just like, there is
Cackling.
no way in hell that you and your butt buddies did not discuss this at length.
I'm
Don't give me
saying,
that bullshit. He's like, you really, you never discuss, literally in every other documentary that you have ever like talked about, like the click or like any combination of you guys talk about driving up and down the roads. All you talked about was the business, hours and hours and hours and hours, nothing but the business. So Shawn, your little best buddy, is involved in one of the biggest moments in wrestling history. And y'all never talk about it. Eat,
okay.
here we go. Eat my ass, part two. Fuck off with that. No, no one's buying that bullshit. All right. No one believes that you and your skip to my loo, let's hold hand like friends. We're not discussing this. Not a one person thinks that you had any kind of like respect for Bret Hart enough to not discuss it. Like
Girl,
dumb.
give
And then
me
like
a break.
I know he's passed. Like all due respect, Scott Hall, but eat shit. You didn't talk about it,
You're
liar.
so, because the way
You're a
if
liar.
this was you and I, the way 2 minutes after it happened, I would be like, bitch, you will not fucking believe what
Believe.
I would be
Please.
ringing your line.
He's like, I never talked about it. Please.
Okay. No, it would be like in a couple of months when we finally see each other, we get in the car and close the door and we're like, girl,
Yeah, it'll be like,
let me
so. And
tell
then he's like,
you.
yeah.
Yes. And then I'm like, drive.
No,
Drive.
no, 100%. Like, there's no way. No one believes you. So
Thank you.
no one
Because
believes you.
okay, because I had this moment because Scott Hall is literally like the whole thing's a work and he's like they're playing it on the TV where he's at and he's like I feel the same way watching it now than I did then that the whole thing's work like you're telling me that Bret is gonna spit on Vince's face and they're gonna have the truck go ooh tight on Vince on the loogie on his face like that wasn't planned ba ba ba
No,
ba
yeah, yes, that there
that happens all the time.
in television shows, especially live ones, there's people that work in the truck, which you should definitely know. They're called producers, and what they do is they instruct the cameramen where to look, where when they're getting cut to. So yes, I do believe that someone in this giant production company saw that moment and was like, that's great television. Let's zoom in on that. Because, baby, it's 1997. We're living in the era of the birth of reality TV. So let's not pretend like things just happening and being recorded is new. Like,
I,
how
I'm
dumb are
saying.
you?
And here's my thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And I'm saying too that Bret Hart is staring down Vince. Bret Hart who just got screwed. You don't think they're gonna say one camera on Bret, one camera on Vince. Because they're staring each other down. You don't think they're gonna have like the camera was already gonna be
that they
there?
could have possibly like it's the pay-per-view. It is like
how insulting to the camera crew, who also, by the way, gets wrestler bodies just dropped on them because
Right.
they're getting the shot. Like,
Right.
okay, I'm glad we talked about this because at first I was like, wait a minute. I was like, and you know that meme where it's like starting spirituality, and I was like, and then it's like midway, and then it's like true enlightenment. And
Right.
I was like, okay, is starting, it's like, wow, Bret Hart got screwed. That's fucked up. Then is like moderate spirituality is like, well, he should have dropped the belt because you go out on your back and that's tradition, blah, blah, blah. And then is like true enlightenment, like it was all a work, so it doesn't matter anyway. I was like,
Right.
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Because then I started going, my wheels were going crazy. And I was literally, when I tell you guys, this is so pathetic. I was sitting in my apartment and I was literally just like staring into the void for probably 30 minutes with my brain like just like,
Yeah.
because I was like, wait a minute. The documentary crew was filming him for a year. They happened to be filming up to the day it's going to be his last night. Like, I'm going like, was this whole thing planned like a year in advance? I'm like pulling all my files. I'm like, what was it a work? And then I'm like, no. I don't know. I mean, sound off in the comments what you guys think, because like if there's more material, if there's more whatever, I don't know. Like, because even I watched the Wrestling with Shadows, it just doesn't give that energy, because Bret, like, they're literally in his kitchen at like 2 a.m. He's getting calls from Vince. It's like, I don't know what's happening to my contract. Like, I just don't feel like this could possibly be a, I don't know. And maybe that's delusional of me and whatever, and people are going to correct me. But okay, I'm glad you feel the same, because I literally was like, I would have never even considered that. But again, that's not why. It's why I'm not in the wrestling business and I'm new to wrestling. That's probably why. But
I can like to a certain extent, I can see like why you would throw that out there, but it's just like no, like use your head even a little bit. It's just like no, these are very visceral, very real reactions, and not for nothing. Like I've seen Bret and Vince act.
Oh,
so
the truth. Oh,
right. It's not like they're not Oscar winners. You know what I mean? Like it's not like, you know what I mean? Like Bret can tell a story like in the ring, but like I'm not gonna put him on a stage and be like, here you go. Like I don't think he's just that good of an actor. You know what I like to like paint his own downfall in that manner. Like
yeah. And I just think, yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say, I just think Bret is so traditional. I don't think he would ever agree to this. I just don't think he would agree to it. He wouldn't even drop the belt to Shawn because he like disrespected him. Like, you think he's gonna disrespect himself by doing a work? Like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I mean, sound off in the comments. Let us know what you guys think. But I thought that was crazy. But Jim Cornette, like you said, laughed so hard and is like, and literally goes, if you think that was work, you are a dumb, stupid fucker.
Yeah.
A dumb, stupid fucker.
Yeah, so funny.
Both words for unintelligent.
You're dumb and stupid. Thank you.
You are dumb and stupid, which is so funny. And, you know, they talk about the impact of revealing the business. Though I will say, like, girl, she's still here. WWE, probably more popular than ever. I mean, like we talked about
honestly, more
WrestleMania
popular
40
than ever, yeah.
Which WrestleMania 41 is quickly approaching then.
Yes, it is. It'll be
like 2 months, 3 months.
It's like the second week in April. Yeah. Vegas.
Girl.
We just had the Royal Rumble this past weekend.
Oh, love that. Love that. Yeah, I try not to watch too much of the new stuff, but like Xavier, if something's really good, we'll send it to me, or like we'll dabble when I go see him.
Speaking of unrelated note, if you speaking of the Royal Rumble, today I was on the Geeks Who Like Sports podcast talking about the Royal Rumble. That episode is out already by the time this comes out. So it is the episode. It has Super Bowl predictions, Marvel trailer, like reviews, and then we talk about the Royal Rumble also, which is the only part I'm in for. It will also be like a mini video out this weekend. I'll link it probably in this episode when this episode gets released.
Oh my God, I love it. I did not know that's what you were going to say.
Oh no, yeah, I forgot. They texted me like earlier because I am a producer on the show, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to do the thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can do the thing." So
I love when you do the thing. Shout out to Geeks Who Like Sports.
So
Me and
yeah.
Ray.
So if you are interested and want to hear my take on the Royal Rumble, the
I
most
do.
recent one, then you can check that out.
I love when you wax poetic about wrestling. That's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Anyway, that's so exciting. I can't wait to watch. Um, but yeah, they talk about obviously the impact of exposing the business, how much it's changed. Obviously, it changed the whole ball game. I will say I think it added a do it like it's funny that it like shattered the illusion, though we already kind of knew the illusion, and obviously I think it made and I wasn't there, but I feel like it added an extra flavor to wrestling where it's like, ooh, like now you can kind of like really weave the story, you can really pick things apart.
Well,
I
it
don't know,
really
I
gave like a, oh, anything can happen. Like anything can
yes.
happen. A couple,
Yes.
yeah, and there was a couple things like that, like, stem like from, so like the fans are now more privy than ever to things that are going on
Right.
behind the scenes. You get the birth of the Vince McMahon character, quote unquote. Um,
Mm.
yeah. And then from here, you also get like this is like the springboard for DX, to kind of like be like the main like group.
Heel.
And then well also as a result, which they don't really go into, um, Jim Neidhart, we're not gonna see anymore. Eventually Davey Boy is also gonna make his way to WCW. He returns years later. Um, and yeah, and the really the saddest part about all of this is that Brett is not around for Owen. Um,
I knew you were gonna say that, and I immediately got
so
tears in my eyes.
yeah,
I can't
so
even think about Owen.
that is like the real like the tragedy of all of this is like because he is somewhere else and has a bad relationship with Vince and the WWF, like he just kind of like is very just separate from all of that, like that goes down. And
I
we'll cross that bridge
oh,
when we cross that bridge.
I'm
So
gonna be a mess. I am restraining myself so hard to cry because especially when we talk about like siblings,
mm,
I
I get
hard,
it. Yeah.
so hard. Um yeah, and we will get there. But uh also the episode, so the Dark Side of the Ring episode ends with because we will get more into obviously there's gonna be a part two, like we said. We will get more into that, but the episode ends with Jim and Vince, Jim Russo, no, Jim Cornette and Vince Russo going back and forth. Vince being like, I don't know why he's even still talking about it. It's been 30 years. I don't care anymore. Like, blah, 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 blah. It's just wrestling. And that's the categorical difference between them is like Vince Russo was like, it's just wrestling, like blah, blah, blah. And for Jim, just wrestling,
Doesn't exist.
it
That
doesn't exist. It's
mm,
wrestling is life and death and everything in between. And
correct.
Vince or Jim says something like so crazy, like, I
He's like, I
will
will piss
live
on
to
Vince.
piss on his. He goes, I don't care if I am ambulatory, incontinent, unable. My wife, it's in the stipulation in the will that if she doesn't do this for me, she's out of the will. She will take me to Vince Russo's grave so I can piss on it and take a picture and have it presented at my funeral.
Right. So
And
funny.
that level of petty is
Is
something that is so aspirational to me.
no, honestly,
To
that's
think, to have your brain
fantastic.
even put those
Do
things
that.
together.
No, fully. As truly, like I can rant, but that guy can rant.
Rant. I
And
mean,
is it's really who I'm trying to model myself after because that's crazy.
that's crazy. And I've said this to Xavier recently. I was like, I'm gonna be honest, like, I'm tired of being nice to people who come at me crazy. I'm tired of
Mhm.
being the big person for people who come at either of us crazy. For people like
No, fully.
so because I'm like, I don't understand. You're coming at me crazy, and I'm supposed to be like, I understand. No, not me. Not me.
No,
I'm living to piss on your grave. Like
no, we're
my
matching
my
energies, beach.
my also elderly wife, because we're around the same age, is taking me in a wheelchair to piss on your grave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that.
Fantastic.
And I love that. And I love that it ended with that. And so, yeah, next week we'll be back with another episode of Ross, which is going to be the Vince McMahon speech.
Interview. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the
Oh,
episode.
I'm psyched and afraid, and we're gonna get into it. And then we'll have part 2 where we talk about Wrestling with Shadows and Screwed, those documentaries the week following.
Yes.
So,
So get
yeah,
ready.
get ready, saddle up. We'll see you next week, and thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye. I'm looking at my notes and they had a wrestling bear. What the fuck? What the fuck?
No, honestly, what the fuck?